Hello, welcome to episode 67 of Crackle Comics Weekly Comic Reviews. I'm Mike, joined alongside Vince. It's just the two-man booth this week. Dan's on a mini vacation for the holiday weekend. But Vince, you and I have enjoyed a week of basketball this week with the NBA playoffs. That started. So instead of how our weeks went, how are you enjoying the games?
They've been entertaining. There's been some unfortunate injuries, some unfortunate events. But as far as kind of the teams and the narratives that I'm following, it's pretty much on track. I'm hoping the Suns-Lakers becomes a little bit more competitive, and I'm just waiting for the Sixers to move on to the next round.
Yeah, everything's kind of gone how I thought it was going to go. I think Suns Lakers. I was talking on my other show this week. That's the series that I'm following the most closely because of the people involved, obviously. But I haven't caught as many Sixer games yet because I think the first game was one of the early games on Sunday, so I wasn't paying attention. The second game was not nationally televised, but they're handling the first round as expected. So I'm not super concerned with them in the first round. But going forward, I expect them to, also take care of whoever they play in the second round as well. But any other surprises for you or no?
I mean, maybe it's slightly surprising that it's only they finished their third game, so the Heat are down to the Bucks 3-0, which is, I guess, slightly surprising that it's probably going to be a sweep. I think, I was listening or watching something, and I don't remember the exact number, but the record of teams recovering from a 3-0 in the playoff series, it's like 100 something to 0. No team has ever done it. I mean, obviously, infamously, there's been some 3-1 comebacks. The Nuggets did it twice in a row last year to get to the West Finals. And then obviously on the biggest stage, the Cavs beat the 73-9 Warriors. But recovering from 3-0 apparently has never, ever been done in the NBA playoffs. So it would be pretty crazy if the Heat were managed to do it. But even if they do, there's then 3-1 and they're just screwed, which is kind of interesting because they did go to the finals last year and they had an up and down season this year because of some COVID stuff and some other things, some injuries. But towards the end of the season, I'm pretty sure they were back on track and they ended up, I don't know. Well, yeah, I guess they're a 6th seed, which it's not 8, it's not 10. So, but it looks like they're about to get swept.
Yeah, the Heat is kind of comparable to what happened to the Penguins this week. They ended up rallying, won their division to enter the postseason, and then were out in 6 games where they just looked really bad. But I expected Heat and Bucks to look a lot closer, but when the Bucks are dropping, 13, 15 threes in the first half and you have 76 points after 2 quarters, it's really hard to overcome by that. But I think we'll conclude our basketball thoughts there as it's a comics pod. I hope you enjoyed that brief segment before we start getting into books, but we'll kick things off with Action Comics number 1031.
Yes. By Philip Kennedy Johnson, art by Daniel Sampier, and I definitely do want to credit colorist Adriano Lucas. So Clark and John, they're dealing with some Mongol stuff because some prisoners have used an old ship to run away from Warworld. They might be Kryptonians. One of them has the House of El crest on their palm, and they speak the language, but it's like an old, out-of-date variant of the language. And they're all screwed up medically, so they're being addressed in the Fortress of Solitude. And the ship, which sunk into the ocean, is now in Atlantean territory, is powered by a mysterious object which seems very similar to the Source, like the Source Wall, Flash, and all that junk. They're possibly time travelers, but they're also, whatever they are, they're also moles for Mongol. Well, they're being manipulated, but Mongols using them as moles to screw with Superman. There's a neat little usage here of Supergirl, Lois, and even Crypto is around. I just like that this does feel like a super family book. And John, like I said, John is with Superman. Like they're basically like a duo now in this title and in the other one. Daniel St. Pierre's art here, and a lot of help from colorist Adriana Lucas. Just fantastic. I don't dislike the other book, but I way prefer this aesthetic over Scott Godlewski on Superman. There's a Midnighter backup in this issue. It has super cool art by Michael Avon, but I have nothing further to say on it because I don't care and I didn't actually read it. I'm just really not feeling any of these backups, the format or the actual things that they're putting in them. So that's this issue. I thought this was, there's nothing like crazy happening yet, at least. But this is a really good Superman book.
Yeah, I pretty much agree all around. When it comes to the backups too, there's been no backup that really draws me in. I really thought Justice League Dark would be the one, but it feels like too crammed and almost like an afterthought. I wish it would have just got its own book, but I think I'm enjoying this book from Philip Kennedy Johnson more than what he's doing in Superman. It's nice seeing Clark, Kara, John, and Lois all working together. The art team, it's gorgeous. St. Pierre draws the Superman with just commanding presence, and then paired with the vibrant colors of Adriana Lucas, he always takes a notice on the page with a striking stage presence, which is what you'd want out of a Superman book, like that opening page where you just see like him in silhouette, but it's the big S right on front of the page. It's gorgeous. I think Lucas is becoming maybe my favorite colorist at DC with his work on Nightwing and Action Comics. Overall, I like this more kind of mystery storyline with these possibly Kryptonians. But I guess we know that they're not by the end of this issue. And PKJ painting Mongol as like this truly insane evil despot rather than just like this big thug that Superman has to throw around every once in a while is definitely taking more shape as, Mongol inspired by Darkseid and Thanos roots here. I think it's looking forward to making, Mongol a truly big bag evil force in the DC universe rather than just like, Thanos clone number 2, which is funny when you know who his creator is, but overall I like this a lot. And then we saw PKJ use Mongol in his Future State book with Superman of Warworld, so I'm wondering if that's ever going to tie in, but I hope it doesn't because we're not really liking Future State, but that was one of the books we did like. But I'll move into the final issue of Batman Black and White, which is Batman Black and White number 6. And the stories here, we have the Second Signals with the Excellence team, being Brandon Thomas and Kerry Randolph. The Abyss, which is a French team of Peric Colinet, also Chariter with Chariter doing art. Opening Moves, which was a writer and art team of just Nick Darrington. Like Monsters of the Deep, John Arcudi, James Herron. 1,000 Words, Scott Snyder, John Romita Jr., and Klaus Janson to end this iteration of the acclaimed anthology series. And I think it went on a pretty high note just about every issue. This one no indifferent, but I think we may have missed issue 5 on the show, but that was also very good. My favorite story being the kind of choose your own adventure one that I think was by Gene Luen Yang, which he continues to evolve just what you can do in the comics medium. But I loved the opening story by Thomas and Randolph. The two brothers build this makeshift bat signal to get Batman's attention as they've noticed people being abducted off the streets. And it's a Mad Hatter story. Very Batman the Animated Series feel here from the creative team of Excellence at Skybound, complete with Randolph drawing the animated series Batmobile. Nick Darrington always impresses me. Very heavy inks here on this one, where it looks almost like it's like just super thick. It looks more digital than something I've seen from before, but unlike anything I've ever seen where he's fighting like this evil noir chess gang. It's great fight choreography. The French creative team of The Abyss with the art just blows me away. Story is Hugo Strange interviewing different people saved by Batman and all the different viewpoints we get on their opinions of him. Kind of very grimy and dirty story we get from Arcudi and Herron on Batman saving abducted women and then fighting Clayface. And the last story to me shows that John Romita Jr. still has got it, and he nails that opening splash page. Scott Snyder writing, of course, focuses on this Batman photographer who is dying and trying to piece together who Batman really is in the guise of a picture that can tell 1,000 words. He ends up falling off a building and being saved by Batman. His final pictures thus being of, him being saved. He wakes up to find his favorite shot placed in the hospital room by Batman as he bought it for himself and he's returning it to him. overall, another great volume of the acclaimed anthology series, and just as strong here with the writing art as it was back in issue 1. I think very little stinkers in this run. Looking forward to seeing when we see the next volume come into this, but we know we still have 3 more issues of Superman Red and Blue, and then we have Wonder Woman Black and Gold to debut later this summer. But to all the creators involved, very strong volume. This is going to come out, I think, a very nice hardcover in a few months. But Vince, thoughts on the final issue of this for now, because it'll definitely come back again.
Yeah, this was a good issue. I mean, you'd think it would come back, but who knows? And I'm hoping there's, I'm sure DC will, but I'm hoping there's a paperback version, because I went with the paperbacks on, all the old editions. And even if you go with the hardcover and you went with the omnibus of the old stuff, I'm sure they're not the same height, whatever. The opening story here was cool. So The Hill, which is like a neighborhood in Gotham, was created by Christopher Priest in a 2001 shot, but like takes place before No Man's Land or something. I thought it was interesting to see that here, because that's something you don't see. Like, you don't see them mention the Hill a ton in Batman comics, even though it's like a kind of interesting thing. It's basically like a parallel of Suicide Slum and Metropolis, which is like where like Black Lightning kind of hangs out there sometimes, stuff like that. I'm a big fan of Elsa Charretier, probably pronounced wrong. She's French. I'm a big fan of her art. It's good here, but I think she's the kind of artist where she might benefit from color a little more. Like, I'm kind of like, obviously I compare her style to Chris Samney because I think they're kind of similar. And obviously Samney does a lot of really great black and white stuff. If you ever follow him for like Inktober or even just his like daily sketches, he puts something out almost every single day. However, I think like as far as sequential art and like the actual like stories and stuff, I think Samney is really elevated a lot by color as well, just because these kinds of like more like cartoony, like looser, I'm bad at describing art, but these like cartoony, like more open styles of art, I think the like classic, like, bright, saturated, like 4-color kind of, comic book style really makes it pop even more. So like I'd be curious if Kirkman was like, he might have already done this, but I'd be curious to see like an issue of Firepower without color. James Herron, who we reviewed his book Ultra Mega, just the first issue, because it was really cool looking, but it wasn't really up any of our alleys. He's a perfect fit for Clayface. Like, he would also be great on a Venom story, characters like that. And I felt like this one, and we've said this about a couple of the stories in this series, this one, to me, this Clayface story felt like a Batman the Animated Series episode, but not precisely. I don't think you'd see it on the show, because the subject matter here, like, you don't see anything, like, nothing's described like real grisly, but I wonder if they use this subject matter here where they're like abducting young girls. I'm not sure if they do that on BTS.
It's interesting you bring that up, because we have the news of that new HBO Max series happening. That's maybe the avenue to do more mature stories like that. But I am interested you say that about that story when we had the BTS car in the opening story, which is interesting.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I think you were more positive on it than I was, but this John Romita Jr. story, the story is kind of cool. It's like a Marvel's type of story where there's like this photographer who works for like the GCPD, and then he goes freelance and sells to newspapers, or it's kind of like Peter Parker, but obviously divorced from Spider-Man. Romita, like, his work actually does look good in black and white, but I still felt this didn't look quite what I'd want from him. But that's where I land on that issue. I am hoping we see more. I mean, there's just like, both you and I together, we could do a fan cast and probably come up with like easily 50 names that we would love to see in this kind of format.
Yeah, definitely. I think I liked the Romita Jr. story a little bit more, because I think this is his final work at DC. And I think as of for now, this is Scott Snyder's last Batman story. It seems that he kind of has put the Batman cowl away, and he's done with Batman for a while. But we know that when the money comes talking, he'll be back.
Yeah, he said that like 5 times. Like, I swear, like at one point,
it's
All-Star Batman was going to be the last thing. And then it's like, oh, here's this metal thing. And then it's, I don't even remember, was it called The Last Batman Story? Or I don't remember what it's called. The post-apocalyptic thing with Joker.
The Last 52 or something was it called for Death
I have no
Metal?
idea.
That was one of the one shots.
No, I'm talking about that Black Label series where it's Batman carrying around the Joker's head.
Oh, Last Night on Earth.
Yeah. So I guess
he seems to be, that's the last thing he's doing with Capullo.
Okay. Technically,
that was the title for that one, but it seems that since he's finished Metal, he's done with Batman. But like you just said, it's like a professional wrestler coming out and saying, "I'm done." It's like, you won't be. You'll be back eventually. It's just a matter of if and when. So, but I looking more, because now we know Ramita's going back to Marvel. That was more so. It's like, oh, it kind of fits and syncs up well. But I also felt like Ramita Jr.'s tenure at DC was never what it could have been. It may be a possible missed opportunity, or it was like, too late to really matter. That's a topic for another day, though. But overall, I still liked this issue, right on par with, all the rest of them. But I'll let you talk about other history of DCU number 4, which was the issue I'd been looking most forward to.
Yes. This is, of course, John Ridley, Giuseppe Camuncoli, Andrea Cucci's series, taking a new perspective on DC history mixed with real-world history. This is the Rene Montoya issue. And like all the other issues, it gives us a date range. So this is covering 1992 to 2007. The former year is when Rene first appeared. At least in comics? I forget. I think she first appeared on the show. But I'm pretty sure Batman the Anime Series debuted in 92 as well. But whatever. It's her first appearance. And 2007, you can figure out where that goes, and I'll basically hint to where that leads us as I go along. So this digs into a lot, her backstory of being closeted, because if you don't know, Rene Montoya is gay. There's some interesting takes on all the villains and Batman. Quickly summed up, the best way to cut to the chase is that one page we see basically a monopoly board of Gotham, and that's kind of how Montoya views the society where you have, these rich people that control Gotham, these poor people that toil for them, and you have Batman, who's like kind of represents the rich people, and then there's all the crazies, and then the cops are like stuck in the middle, and there's good cops and bad cops, and that's all touched on here. She has her own takes on all of that, including injustice and everything. There are real-world references, as we've seen throughout. There's references to Rodney King's beating, to Arthur Ashe's death from HIV complications, which adjacently connects to her thinking about and contemplating her sexuality. And then there's 9/11 and all the wars and laws that resulted from that. In universe, we trace our way through No Man's Land, Officer Down, Gotham Central, Infinite Crisis, and then 52. And that's basically where we leave off, like some of her stories immediately after 52, I guess, when she becomes the question. There, in relative terms, she's the question on the cover of this. Actually, I'm not even certain if she's the question. I think she is. Yeah, she is. And then she's the question for like 3 pages, which granted, in her history, she was not she became the question pretty late. And then obviously a couple of years later, it gets all out of whack with the new 52. There are some unique ideas here, and it's cool getting her point of view. But to me, honestly, and like he said, Mike was looking forward to this issue. And I think he wasn't quite paying as close attention to previous issues. So I'm definitely interested to hear what he thinks. But to me, this didn't totally recontextualize bits of history quite like the other issues. I mean, essentially what Montoya is doing here is like the argument that everyone constantly brings up, that Batman is this immoral, warped version of justice, and the whole why do all these villains go to Arkham and then they're out on the street again, and then they're back in Arkham and then they're out on the street, the whole revolving doors thing, and just all the hypocrisies of just vigilantism in general, but then how it applies to Gotham. So this wasn't very there wasn't any really new like ideas for me here. The last issue is apparently the final one, which honestly, like, I know we're going forward in time, so we're getting pretty close to present. But if they wanted to like jump back and forth, you could totally make this longer if Ridley wanted to. But the last issue will follow Thunder, aka, and this appears Black Lightning's daughter. And of course, the first issue, I believe, was Black Lightning. So it'll be interesting to compare. And I'm very interested to see how they handle that, because Black Lightning's daughters were characters that like kind of didn't exist for a while during the New 52. And then they're like not super prominent right now either. So that one might actually kind of overlap more with this issue, because like the like peak of like Thunder and Light and like those characters is really like the 2000s with Judd Winnick's Outsiders, and then I guess bits of Jeff Johns' JSA. Like they're not prominent here, but we'll probably see a blend of the Black Lightning TV show as well. But this was, I mean, all the craft here is really good, and it's still pretty interesting.
Yeah, it times it felt like I was just reading a character biography. There wasn't anything completely new recontextualized here. I thought the real world elements were very well integrated, which they have been, I think, the entire series so far, as I've been following it more from afar, not as forward on the show. It makes total sense that she's not the Question until like the last 3-4 pages of the book, because that's more recent history that's honestly, not really explored, and the New 52 kind of wiped out a lot of that, because I'm pretty sure the Question for at least one portion was set up as one of the Trinity of Sin, and that never went anywhere. So that's just one element of what happens when people get lost in the shuffle. But it is nice to see that in recent history that Rene is back as the Question. We saw her in that Lois Lane book, in elements of Bendis' Superman. And before that, I think the last big moment for her was at the beginning of Final Crisis, which was another huge event that was not referenced here. And Infinite Crisis was, obviously, but I'd also say it was fun seeing the art team emulate the different art styles from the different books. So we get they do a couple of homages to Michael Lark from Gotham Central, and then there's a brief Question recap of Vic Sage. So we get to see them do Dennis Cowan. So that was really cool to see as well. But overall, no, I enjoyed it, and I thought it was very well done. And I think it scratched the surface of, I think if I remember correctly, like Montoya doesn't like Batman at first, but then I think it was the episode POV where it's all the 3 different detectives talking about what happened with Batman and how they saved him. That's where she started coming around to respect Batman and like him. So that was, I think that was kind of slyly referenced here, but overall, no, it was another very good issue, and I'm excited to see what Ridley does going forward. If we want to talk about recent news, I know Coates is wrapping up his run on Black Panther this week, and Ridley has been announced as the next writer of Black Panther. So I know we've been impressed with this series. We didn't like the next Batman as much, but we also were very high on his story in Wolverine Black, White, and Blood. So I'm very much excited to see what John Ridley is going to do over at Marvel with Black Panther before we break into Strange Adventures. Anything to say on that?
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I mean, Black Panther's up there as like one of my favorite characters. Like, I mean, I have a long list of favorite characters, but he's in there somewhere. And a new number one, it's going to be a great opportunity. And I've been impressed by a lot of what Ridley has written that we have read. So I'm very interested to see where he takes things.
Yep, and then coming after the big, defining run that Coates has just had, wrapping up 50 issues, I'm wondering to see where he takes the ball next for that world over at Marvel. But I'll head into Strange Adventures number 10, which, Vince, cover your ears, because you're not going to like what I'm going to say about what has happened to the character of Adam Strange. This is Tom King, Mitch Gerrits, and Evan Doc Shaner. For those that are familiar with Tom King 12-issue maxi series, this is the point where the big revelation happens and the setup for the grand finale begins. Definitely a kind of exposition dump, but a reward for those that have been paying attention and trying to decipher what's been going on. And Alana Strange is reading the letter that Mr. Terrific sent her, where he shows what he's uncovered and all the lies and the cover-ups that have happened. The Picts were not defeated on Ran, Adam Strange cut a deal with them. He gave them Earth for Rand in exchange to give up his daughter as collateral. And Aaliyah, he gives Aaliyah to the Picts as collateral. In exchange, he got to be as cruel to the Picts as he wanted, to set up the case for the JLA to find out and paint him as this madman. And, this let the defenses open and exploitable, as Alana would then go on TV to defend her husband. And it gets all on the public side of this, where we, the reader, are seeing her, meeting with the president and, basically mobilizing, propaganda against it. And this is all coming to light at the end, Alana going on this giant press tour. But the ending sees Adam Strange enter their home just as Alana is finished reading this letter. And, the device of Alana removing her makeup, which is, this beautiful visual device just so the charade is no more. And that, we're back to reality now. And she knows what Adam's done, is kind of striking, probably one of King's best issues, because now she's like, oh, I know my husband just sold out our daughter. So what's going to happen with the execution of this? Are they going to stick the landing of this book? It's in the next 2 issues. I think it's going to be a very kind of explosive and confrontative, dramatic finish. But just as the series was starting to dip for me, it comes right back in. I honestly think, like, if you put the holds on, the stops on of what you want to think of Adam Strange, and just be like, oh, it's Black Label, you can do what you want, and you cross your fingers that this doesn't bleed into the regular DC universe, this, on the surface, is one of King's best things he's ever written, I feel. Definitely fastly climbing up with what I like the most. And this is coming after I think it dipped a little bit, but he pulls you right back in. I'm excited to see how it finishes. But if there's elements of this that get pulled into the main universe, there's a different side of that where I'm not going to be as happy. But looking at the work as it lies, I think this is very, very good. And still, the art team, I've gushed about it every issue. There's nothing new to say with them. It's still great. But our next issue was Haha number 5, which is the second to last issue. Last issue will be number 6.
Yeah, this is the series by W. Maxwell Prince, and each issue has had a new artist, and this one's by Gabriel Hernandez Walta, who people will know from Vision with Tom King, among other things. So Pound Foolish is our character here. She's an old woman. She's a former circus clown, and she's also good at cooking. But she's very grumpy and mad about everything. She basically has like a bitter, nostalgic view on life, where she like keeps all of her old like circus memorabilia and is upset that things aren't the way that they used to be. And meanwhile, there's a bunch of kids who have a mischief club. They go and hang out in a treehouse, and they give each other silly little missions to just be jerks somewhere. And one of them is stuck with stealing something from Foolish's house. So as she gets home after a trip to the grocer and starts making cauliflower casserole, this kid, Billy, sneaks into her house, but he gets freaked out by all the circus stuff around, screams, and then passes out. And while he's passed out, he has like a dream about the circus. And as he wakes up, Pound Foolish, the woman, feeds him and then gives him a gift that he didn't need to steal anything. She just gives him like a clown mask. This was really good and sentimental. I was like the whole time, mostly because, the whole clown thing, like it's always felt adjacent to Ice Cream Man, which is like W. Maxwell Prince's big book that we like knew him from. It's felt like slightly adjacent the whole time. So I was kind of waiting for a grisly twist that never came. And it ends with a hopeful and nostalgic tone, while previous issues have been like they've ended on a super depressing note, some of them. I wasn't sure how to react at first, because like this kind of story is just not something you'd expect to read in a mainstream comic. But it was pretty cool. And Walter killed it on art, of course.
This is the first thing by W. Maxwell Prince I didn't really like. I just thought it was kind of flat. There was not really much to it, which maybe that's because I was expecting the shoe to drop and the horrible, horribly sad ending to happen, but it didn't happen here. The art was good, but also just I didn't think that was the place for this artist on this story. That's the biggest disconnect I've had with it. The series is still good. Like this is, you look at the craft, everything was well done here. I just didn't like the story as much. I couldn't really gel with like the old woman character. There was something to it, but it was nothing for me. Which is rare. I think it was rare for me to say that from this writer at this point. But I'm wondering how they're going to do the last issue because it is the Ice Cream Man team. It's Martin Morazzo and Chris O'Halloran for the last issue with, of course, W. Maxwell Prince. And I look at that cover; those smiles are very similar to the Ice Cream Man smile. So I'm wondering: is the last issue gonna all tie into Ice Cream Man somehow, or is that just the signature Martin Morazzo smile?
Yeah, I think actually the cover for the next issue is an homage to the cover for Ice Cream Man #1. So they're definitely drawing the connection. I don't know if it will be connected. Probably not. But and also I didn't know it was ending, but I guess that makes sense. Just a little side thing.
The way things work the way things work at Image at this point, it could get more issues, but I think when I looked at the solicits, it's only 6 issues. But if they ever wanted to do a volume 2, which that's kind of how Image books work. If, volume 1 sells enough, they'll come back and do like a season 2 or something. I'm sure Image would be more than happy to have them do another round. But I'll get into Black Widow #7, which this is Kelly Thompson, Elena Casagrande, inks by Casagrande and Elisabetta D'Amico, and then colors by Jordi Belair. So second issue in this arc, which is establishing the new status quo of Natasha and Yelena Belova working together as they try and infiltrate this new shady organization that resembles the Red Room. They rescued this young girl named Lucy who has like electric powers. And there's like a class of ideologies between Natasha and Yelena as she doesn't want her being brought into this life as she's, starting to train her in how to fight. And Natasha just wants to give her the choice of like, she doesn't have to be brought into this. Let's not force her. So we get the different styles clashing here. And, Natasha's still, reeling from the whole fake status quo of her having, being married and having a kid. And the kid, kid and husband were real. Like the opening pages here, her waking up and remembering the baby. But Natasha's kind of going into business for herself here because she doesn't truly trust Yelena as she actually recruits, and Vince can correct me if I'm wrong. I know he didn't read the book this week, but is Anya Corazon still Spiderling or is she Spider Girl? Because that's who she gets to kind of go deep undercover in this organization, and they manage to get one of the henchmen before they can question him. But he melts into goo. He had like these stretchy powers, and gifted to him by this organization. But something has gone wrong, and just like his body, along with his like organs and bones, they reject it, and he just literally just becomes a puddle of goo in the middle of their safe house. And now Lucy, seeing that's like, well, I got powers from them. Is that going to happen to me? So that's where we go from here. Art team's still superb. I'm wondering, Vince, I'm wondering if you'll come back. I know you left, but I have to say you didn't like the new costume that was teased. If you flip through the book when you get a chance, there's a very much disconnect between what Casagrande is drawing and Adam Hughes is drawing on covers, because the inside the book, it looks like a standard Black Widow costume, just like the seam highlights on the arms and legs are red, and the hood is on the back, but it's never like in effect. I would say the hairstyle is more different than anything, while Adam Hughes is drawing this much more kind of slim, basically tracksuit hoodie look. So it's kind of weird to see such two different takes on the same costume in a book like that. But I'm really liking the spy stuff that's going on in this Black Widow book. And I'm still enjoying it. But I'll let you talk about the Marvels, the second issue.
Yeah, it's Anya is Spider-Girl currently. And I don't know, I might try it at the book again. So the Marvels #2 by Kurt Busiek, Yulda Ray Sinar, colors by Richard Isenove. So I caught up on the first issue. I think we missed it for the show. The concept is basically anyone, anywhere, anytime. So Kurt Busiek, with his encyclopedia brain, he's telling stories pulling from the entire web of Marvel's world and history. We kind of have a focal point character here, similar to Phil Sheldon from the original Marvels. His name is Kevin Schumer, and he works with an app called Kashum. And basically, he's a New Yorker who's into the lore of the heroes and villains. He knows them all, their histories, where they hang out. And this app is kind of like Citizen, which is a real app that I use to know when there's like crimes nearby in the neighborhood or fires, or there's like protests happening, things like that. But this Kashum app alerts to superhero or villain related stuff going down. And they also do city sightseeing tours in basically what seems to be like abandoned prototype Fantastic cars. And when he's on one of these tours, there's a building that blows up. And he also has some kind of his own invented gear or found gear, like an old Goblin glider even. And there's an explanation for that as we get into the second issue. But this whole initial arc seems to be something related to Sin Kong, which is a fictional Southeastern Asian country in Marvel. There's also a little Sin Kong in New York, kind of like, Chinatown and Little Italy and stuff. And Sin Kong is basically a stand-in for Vietnam and or North Korea. Like, it depends on the context. Like, it's related to a lot of retcons where, like, early in the 60s Marvel, like, there were lots of things like Punisher Vietnam and, like Iron Man Mandarin Vietnam, all that stuff. And so they changed some of those to Sin Kong. There's some drug stuff going down, basically, related to Sin Kong. There's a guy named Donnie Cruel behind it all. I don't recognize that name. I think he's been introduced here. And on one of those tours that I was talking about, well, actually, I already said this. So a building blows up. And then Kevin goes to scout it out later, and he comes across Black Cat, who knows his uncle. And so it turns out that his uncle is the Tinkerer. There's also these other scenes here where there's a new character called Threadneedle, and he's like some cosmic being. He kind of looks like he's David Bowie, and he's aware of how all these interlocking threads work. And for some reason, he's hanging out with Ace, who's like this obscure, like 1980s Peter David Spidey character. And so far through these first two issues, we've seen Cap doing something. We've seen Punisher. We've seen the Thing in Human Torch. We've seen Arrow, who's one of those like relatively recent characters from Asia. We've seen Melinda May, who's introduced on the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show, but exists in the comics as well. And others have shown up. Honestly, the plot of this series, kind of hard to summarize since it's both like packed, like there's tons of webs going in and out, but it's also decompressed, if that makes sense. But I'm kind of digging it. Next issue, we're going to see Reed and Ben from the Fantastic Four, but before the Cosmic Rays. And we're also going to see the Winter Soldier in his, actual Winter Soldier Hydra era. So that'll be interesting. It's a pretty cool series. I kind of like how Marvel's just like Busiek, like do whatever you want, make it tangentially related to Marvel's. And he's like several series in on that. And now I'll move right over to Reptil #1, written by Terry Blas, who is a name I'm not familiar with, and also art by Ennio Balam, also not familiar with. I'm pretty sure I've heard of the inker Victor Olazaba, but a new creative team. This seems like a very weird book to exist, but I'm guessing that this pitch just landed well, and I think the writer's from other media or something. I mean, it's not a name I recognize, so I don't think he's like a big deal that's like bringing in other fans. I don't know. I do know Reptil, aka Humberto Lopez from Avengers Academy, which was a fun teen hero book written by Christos Gage, like others that I enjoy, like Strange Academy and some of the X books through the years. Reptil wasn't one of my favorites, but he's all right. I like others like Metal, Hazmat, and Finesse more. We get a recap of stuff that's gone down in his life, and it just completely skips over Avengers Arena, which is for the better. He's no longer a superhero because of the stupid Kamala's law, but he's not really into using his powers right now anyway. And also his powers are messed up, and his girlfriend broke up with him. He and his grandfather are moving in with relatives, and his grandfather has some kind of medical issue going on that he's not sharing with everyone. And Beto is still upset about his parents disappearing years ago, which is like tied into his origin. And while he's out getting tacos with his cousins, a villain who can control rocks wants the amulet that's stuck in his chest and gives him his powers and attacks him. and the female cousin has powers all of a sudden, and the villain teases the location of his parents. This was fine, I guess. Like, I mean, it definitely felt like somewhat authentic of like a Mexican American guy, you know, writing about Mexican American teenagers and such. But I just, like, I'm not huge into this character. I didn't think it was amazing. The art's pretty house style, and I'm not reading it any longer.
I didn't check out the book, but at least I'll say it's nice to see a character that got their start in the Marvel Superhero Squad show, kind of aimed at a much younger generation. I'm going to guess people that watch that show are probably at that age where they might remember this character, and if they see it on the shelves, maybe they'll pick up a comic book. So hopefully that works out. I feel like kind of pipe dreamy when I say that, but happy to see that, you know, the character's still around and not completely abandoned. But I'll get into Detective Comics number 1036. This is Mariko Tamaki, Dan Mora, Jordie Bellaire on colors. So there's the backup story in this book is Huntress, and that's kind of the only one that I am reading. And I also think it's like one of the only ones where the main writer of the series is also writing the backup. I think there's one other one where it's doing that, but off the top of my head, I don't know. But the plots are starting to converge here as Batman and Huntress meet face to face to swap case notes. You know, Batman's investigating the death of Sarah Worth, a mob boss's daughter, and Huntress is the death of her friend, and they're both connected. So Bruce is visited on the street by the apparent zombie version of Sarah, but it turns out to be, you know, it turns into clay because she just like disintegrates. And it turns, you know, the investigation thinking, oh, it's Clayface, but it turns out it's actually Lady Clayface. If you remember the era where there were like 6 different Clayfaces, that was one of the ones that were like completely abandoned. Think back to like the Mud Packer. I think it was that might have been an Alan Grant Brayfocal thing. I know the Mud Pack story was at least. And Lady Clayface doesn't know who she is anymore, and she's disoriented after the A-Day bombing in Infinite Frontier number 0, where Arkham got blown up and all the villains, you know, got displaced / died / whatever. But more mysterious deaths occur from, you know, Mr. Worth, and Penguin is involved as Mayor Nakano is trying to deal with like this impending, you know, gang war happening. So I'd like that Tamaki is bringing back some of the old blood Gotham family, you know, mob rivalries back into this, Mr. Worth being a new one. But it's fun when you got that mob element and Batman going after that. And it, once again, like, just love watching and seeing Dan Mora draw Batman, which is a treat. I know so many fans have wanted Dan Mora to draw Batman after, you know, looking at his social media pages. And then, you know, Dan Mora Batman with Jordie Bellaire colors. That's, you know, that's the comic fan's biggest dream when it comes to a Batman creative team. Some awesome panels in here of just Batman on gargoyles, which is always fun to see. But I really like the converging elements of the main feature and backup, which I talked about at the beginning here, but the backups with Clayton Henry on art, and you know, she's picking up where her thing left off after being with Batman. So it's almost like organically part 1, part 2. I really like how the book is structured right now, and the heavy focus on the detective work in this, which is something that, you know, me, Vince, and Dan always applaud when the Detective Comics title is a little bit more straightforward, not as big as bombastic. It's just kind of a straightforward Batman, you know, crime to crime book. And I think that's what Tamaki and Mora are trying to bring to this. I know I'm the only one reading this right now, but definitely a good time to catch up here. But yeah, like the traditional mysteries. And I have to say, when it comes to, I know if we pick a Batman book that we're all enjoying, I know we're all going to say Nightwing, but the book with Batman in it that I prefer right now is definitely this one to just the main Batman book. So if you're thinking of what kind of Batman book you want in this ever-expanding sea of there's a book for you in the Bat titles, check this one out. But I'll hand it over to Vince for the Stargirl Spring Break special.
Yeah, so I think this is the biggest release of the week, or something we didn't read. Who knows? I'll try and be quick on this because this is an oversized issue. It teases some things and it throws some wrenches around. So this is written by Jeff Johns, art by Todd Knock, at least for the most part, and I'll get to that. So first, we start the issue with Green Arrow and Emiko, which is slightly surprising considering this is the Stargirl Spring Break special. But that's so that Jeff Johns can reveal a giant retcon. Or maybe it's old, I'm not sure. Maybe this is something pre-New 52 that like was a thing, you know, in the post-crisis universe. I don't remember. But the idea is that here's the out of universe background. So several superheroes existed in both the Golden Age and the Silver Age with limited change. So obviously, for Green Lantern, there's Alan Scott in the Golden Age, Hal Jordan in the Silver Age, Flash, Jay Garrick, Barry Allen, totally different characters, costumes, etc. But Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, Aquaman, and like a couple other really minor ones, they basically just kept on trucking, and like there were slight changes. So like there is a point where we say this is where Superman enters the Silver Age, this is where Aquaman enters the Silver Age, and basically they changed like the cover's gloves, and just other things like that. But in universe, the explanation once they started the whole crisis thing, the whole Earth 1, Earth 2, is that you have two identical people on each Earth. But after Crisis, when you're now in a single Earth timeline, how does that work? Well, the Trinity were never super prominent in the JSA adventures anyway, so poof, just ignore that. But you don't even have to ignore it because Earth 2 Batman was already dead by the time of Crisis. Earth 2 Wonder Woman, well, actually, she didn't die in Crisis. She gets like married to Steve Trevor and like disappears into Olympia. And then Superman goes into the limbo and reappears in Infinite Crisis. Earth 2 Aquaman just never mattered at all, so like was never a thing anyways. But Green Arrow and Speedy are difficult because they were in the Seven Soldiers of Victory, which is originally was a Golden Age team alongside the JSA. I believe actually what the explanation, maybe the original explanation pre-Crisis, was that the Seven Soldiers was not a Golden Age, like was not an old team. It was a more current team. I don't really know. But Johns is saying, oh, it turns out time travel, thanks to Clock King, randomly for a period through Oliver Queen and Roy Harper into the past. And I guess because they're in the past, Oliver shaved. So the shaven, like OG costume version of Green Arrow was in the 40s on the Seven Soldiers of Victory and displaced from the present for like a couple of years. And then eventually they got back to the present. So Green Arrow and Emiko are here. And then the modern Jeff Johns version of Crimson Avenger from his JSA run randomly shows up saying that the original Crimson Avenger needs help. And he died in one of those whatever happened to backups, which we've referenced at least, sometime on the show. Those were in the back of issues of DC Comics Presents in the Bronze Age. And now we finally get to Stargirl. She's on spring break with her stepfather, who used to be Stripe C on the Seven Soldiers, but now he pilots the mecha suit and goes by Stripe. And they're joining this Seven Soldiers mission. And there's a super weird page with a profile of Courtney, and Todd Knock signs the page, Todd Knock after McFarlane. Like he's referencing the fact that like only Todd McFarlane does these like full page side of a character's face. It's just really weird. Like I don't think he needed to credit the page to McFarlane as an homage. Pat catches Courtney up on Seven Soldiers lore. So apparently, to what I was saying earlier, so eventually not only Green Arrow and Roy, but all the Seven Soldiers got thrown forward in time. And that's why they're not all ancient human beings falling apart. And part of the time travel nonsense is suggested to have factored into Roy's struggles with drugs. It's like a very subtle reference, but it's like, yeah, he dealt with time travel. So like that probably had to do with why he picked up heroin. And then this version of Crimson Avenger, who has less than 20 total appearances in any continuity, first appeared in Courtney's Stargirl book, and then was her junior in the JSA, because like Courtney was like basically the leader of that team at certain points. She doesn't seem to know who Courtney is, which is continuity headache, and then is bossing her around and is like, I'm older than you. And it's like, she is? So there's just continuity headaches. But at the same time, Jeff Johns is indirectly referencing stuff that happened in Infinity Inc. issues, like 50 issues into that series in the 80s with Roy Thomas on Earth 2, talking about the death of the original Star Spangled Kid, who at that time was called Skyman. So the original Crimson Avenger, despite what happened in DC Comics Presents in the Bronze Age, is still alive, but then he dies, or seems to die. No, he dies. Clock King disappears. and now they have to save Wing, who was actually he wasn't the 8th. No, yeah, Wing was like the 8th Soldier of Victory, or yes, yeah. So Wing is not dead either, even though he died or he was shown to be dead in like Avengers 101, like 100 to 102, which we read one of those for a retro book as well. And then that's basically where this ends. And then there's a quick backup tease by Brian Hitch for a JSA book coming. Nothing happens in those pages. And there's also said to be a Stargirl actual series coming. It's basically the Johns team as we kind of know them from a dozen years ago on this JSA splash. Plus, they're adding in the Yolanda Montez version of Wildcat and the Beth Chappell version of Dr. Midnight, who are originally from Infinity Inc., but I guess they're on the Stargirl TV show, so they're kind of melding that to make it slightly tie in. There's a great Jerry Ordway Seven Soldiers pinup, and there's also a really fun Fred Hembeck parody of Where's Waldo, because, of course, Stripesy originally wears basically a Waldo shirt, red and white, like bread stripes. There's so many freaking continuity questions here, but whatever. And I think Johns has fallen off hard, in my opinion, over the past like 10 years. 75% of what he's done since then has kind of annoyed me. But without touching the whole DCEU Ray Fisher, Jeff Johns stuff with a 10-foot pole, I will say that I'm genuinely excited for both of these new titles, even though it's so damn safe to have Jeff Johns jump back on them. And it's also bound to have so many asterisks like I was bitching about this whole time.
So wait, did I hear that correctly? You said you're excited for a Jeff Johns DC book in 2021?
For two of them.
And you liked Geiger? Do you not totally hate Jeff Johns anymore, or do you just hate everything around it?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I would say hate everything around it. But to be fair, I think I said this on the show last week. There's like at least 3 books from DC that I really, really like that I'd put in my top 10. And hopefully, assuming he doesn't crap his pants, potentially 2 more to add. But these 2, they're going to be, it's going to be so much nostalgia goggles. Like, he's literally had 3 runs on the JSA now. This is his 3rd run.
Yeah. That's my thing. We've talked about that in the acts of diminishing returns, right? You have the one big run, and they come back for the reunion tour, and it's, it scratches. It's not quite. Normally, it's not quite as good. And the 3rd one, it's just like, it's like Wade with Cap, right? Although, of course, I think all 3 of Wade's runs are pretty good. Well, but that last Cap run is very short, but I did like it.
Yeah, I would say like Claremont touching X-Men over and over and over again. Or honestly, like if you want to go to Wade, I'd say Wade returning to Flash. But yeah, the thing with Jeff Johns basically is as his career rose and rose, the kind of gimmick with him was he just kept flipping between titles. And it was like, I'm going to make this the best book for DC. I'm going to make, I'm going to revamp this whole lore. Did it with Flash, did it with, Aquaman, did it with Green Lantern, Hawkman, JSA. But now it seems like he's in an era where it's like, you can arguably say, to when he touched Flash again with Barry Allen, where it's like retread time. And, he had the 2 runs on quote unquote Shazam, and now he's 3rd run on JSA. So like, he's kind of settling into that Claremont thing. Because I guess, it's not like he missed that many characters that he, didn't get to. Like, he pretty much got to them all on the, in the A-list at least. So whatever. I mean,
say he's done Superman twice now too.
Yeah,
if you count that new 2 run.
Yeah, and then for Batman, it's Earth 1. He did Flash, he did Green Lantern. He never really did Wonder Woman, I guess, but I don't know that I want that from him.
No. I was going to say, like, what's left for him to do at DC? Legion's there, but I know he did Superman in the Legion, but he didn't, and then he did Legion of 3 Worlds during Final Crisis, but he still, that seems to, with where they're at now after Bendis, I don't know if he really wants to touch it. Does anyone want to touch it? That seems to be Bendis's deal, because I think that book's going to come back under him.
Well,
But
what's weird is
in this book, I did like this book, but I guess we're going to get into that discussion of what is next or what would you want from DC from Jeff Johns in 2021.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, well, first I was going to quickly say that we thought we were going to get Legion, and we thought we were going to get JSA, and I guess we maybe thought we were going to get something like Wally West related. But with the whole, the delays to Doomsday Clock and all kinds of other stuff, and editorial and management changes, and John's being involved with DCU, obviously plans changed, and certain other people took up certain things. But we are getting JSA from him now, and I don't know that that's what I was saying. I don't know what else I would want from him in 2021. So maybe the lesser of two evils is to just put on the nostalgia goggles and jump back to the bottom of the well and retread things, rather than try and mess around with another character he didn't get to.
I think you'll horribly disagree with what I'm about to say, but Bendis was kind of in that same spot at Marvel when he came to DC. I wouldn't mind seeing Jeff Johns go back to Marvel because the only thing he did there was Avengers. I think I'd rather, I've seen him play the hits at DC and now redoing it. I'd rather see him do something else and tackle a new character. Like a Jeff Johns Captain America run to me would be something that I'd kind of be open to, just seeing what he's done with Superman. But, I feel like that would be, I guess, fair to both companies in terms of we get Bendis, you get Jeff Johns, and you kind of a fun what if trade scenario. But really? I don't think either guy is at their stature of where they used to be in 2021.
Real quick, to be fair, he did a Vision miniseries, which is really just part of his Avengers kind of, but he also did a Thing miniseries, and he did a Morlocks miniseries, which is the most stupid, obscure thing ever. But I actually don't disagree with you at all. I think it would be really interesting to see him go to Marvel, but I think that's 10 years past impossible, because he's just, first of all, he's publicly said he basically doesn't give a crap about Marvel, and leaps and bounds prefers DC.
He's a DC guy,
but also he's so entrenched with, even though his role is slightly changed, he's still so entrenched with the multimedia stuff that DC does, with the Stargirl show. He's heavily involved with the Green Lantern show thing that's going on, other things that are in development. So I feel it would be an even bigger deal. I mean, it may not be a bigger deal in terms of hype and sales within comics, but as far as someone switching sides, it would actually be a bigger deal than Bendis moving. And I think, for better or worse, I don't think it'll ever happen.
Yeah. No, I don't think it'll happen either, especially with how much she's doing with the TV show multimedia element of it. But it's just one of those what if scenarios you can always throw out there. But we've spent enough time on Stargirl Spring Break special. It was very good. I enjoyed it. It was fun seeing Todd Knock draw things out. I thought that was also good. But I'll move into Harley Quinn number 3, which Stephanie Phillips, Riley Rossmo, Ivan Placencia is coloring. And Harley, in her quest to improve herself, they think the kind of the base of this book is Harley's trying to improve herself as a person. She wants to be a better person and help the former henchman of the Joker to try to go on the straight and narrow, but it doesn't go as planned because she's trying to do this self-help group, and it's hijacked and overrun by people working for Hugo Strange, who's after her and trying to round up all the clowns and incarcerate them for, the blame of what Joker did during Joker War. So we get this maniacally and expressively beautiful car chase by Rossmo, which takes the turn of Harley getting thrown into a sewer. Getting thrown into a sewer and disturbing Solomon Grundy. I still am really, gelling with this, and I find it just really fun and refreshing. The fact that I'm enjoying a Harley Quinn book, I just wouldn't have thought I would have enjoyed it after the character's history the last few years, but Phillips is doing some really good and interesting character stuff here, and Rossmo making it worth, at least flipping through with his unique art style. I think that we were always kind of wondering what Rossmo was going to do, because they were always in these, the anthology books, and then announced as the ongoing artist for Harley. We were like, oh, that's a weird choice, but it totally meshes well in a fun and zany way that you kind of expect would fit a Harley Quinn book. But Vince, thoughts on this? This is your first issue reading this series.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Rossimo's art, really fun, kinetic. I was slightly confused on the storytelling in the very end because it seems like she just like bumps into Solomon Grundy, but I don't know. I'm just nitpicking. I thought that like final part of that page, and that page is really, really cool. But then the transition from the end of that page into the next panel, I was slightly confused by. Yeah, Rossimo's just really fun character designs, fun action, really cool layouts. And I think Phillips has a pretty, limited exposure so far for me, but has a pretty good grasp on Harley, and this is a fun take on Harley. It is interesting. I don't know if the first two issues went on this, but this issue, like, we are delving into her connection with Joker, which is kind of like a balancing act thing with Harley, where it's like, in a Harley book, do you want the Joker all over it? Do you want the Joker not mentioned whatsoever? And I'm assuming, most Harley writers like really trying to make it a Harley book. You realistically have to kind of come down somewhere there in the middle. And so, yeah, I think this is a cool book.
And then it's that time for X-Men Corner. So what's happening in X-Men this week? We'll start with New Mutants.
So in New Mutants by Vidi Ayala and Rod Reese, the Krakoan status quo allows Karma to fix some Claremontian weirdness about her origin / backstory. Because if you're not familiar, Karma, her dead brother's soul inhabits her body as well, and could never be separated or freed, despite all the telepaths and crazy science that involves the X-Men. But now there's a loophole. If she kills herself in the Crucible, maybe it will work and they can be actually resurrected separately, even though he's a bad guy. And that's why she absorbed him in the first place, because they have basically the exact same powers where they can like mind control people type of stuff, but he's a jerk about it. So potentially a bad idea to bring him back. We'll see. And I'm also not 100% sure how Cerebro has a log of him. I'd have to go read Marvel Team Up 100 to figure out, how they came across Karma, but whatever. And I still don't fully understand the Crucible, because Karma's fighting Danny Moonstar in the Crucible, and instead of like, I guess like, I don't know if it's like the rules or if it's you actually have to do this, where you actually have to put up a fight for some reason instead of just like the person just killing you. Because I don't know what happens if the one who wants to die wins the fight and kills the other person. I guess nothing, because they just resurrect them too. But I don't fully understand the rules of this. I have to go read whatever dumb issue that was again. Then Scout, aka Gabby, aka Honey Badger, X-23's sister, gets advice from Warpath because she doesn't want her friends being manipulated by Shadow King. And Wolfsbane wants to hear her out, but not really. Wolfsbane just like walks her up to Shadow King and is like, okay, bye. You should just talk to him directly if you have a problem. And then Xi'an is resurrected, and also she's resurrected with her prosthetic leg. I don't know how that works. I guess it's similar to Kid Omega, where there was one issue of X-Force where he was talking about there's all kinds of customization options if you really want to. And like X-Force gets to cheat the rules and do whatever they want on that front. And the thing is, I'm pretty sure, like, I understand, like, this is a screw it either way situation, because I'm pretty sure there are like character moments where Karma doesn't like having a robotic leg. Like, she actually doesn't like it. But also, if you get rid of her robotic leg, then, it's like the Barbara Gordon scenario, where you're getting rid of representation of, people who don't have, human legs and stuff like that, have been in accidents and things like that. And then I was like looking into it further, and apparently like somewhere on the island, they just keep like a vat of adamantium around. And every time Wolverine dies, they graft it back on his body, which that like kind of makes sense, because the whole feral thing, if they don't put the adamantium in, then he's going to eventually turn into a creepy no-nose having weirdo. But like, it's still going to be painful every time he gets resurrected. It's so weird. And then also, Has Rogue died? I felt like Rogue died in Excalibur when we were still reading that, but I think it was like a fake death, so they didn't actually have to resurrect her. It was like more like a coma thing. But if Rogue does die, if she has died already, should she be able to fly because she absorbed those powers from Carol Danvers, Ms. Marvel back in the day? I don't know how that works. The status quo, it's entirely dumb. This issue was fine, I guess. The Rod Reese art was like pretty different page to page. Like sometimes it would be exactly what you expect from him, sometimes less detailed, but it was never bad. Whatever. And as far as my note on the status quo being dumb, at least in my opinion, that partially serves as a good transition to our next book.
Yes, for X-Men number 20. Before I begin, I think for Vince, the Crucible is for people that lost their powers in M-Day events. So they got to go through the Crucible with no powers to theoretically earn them back. So I guess the point would be that the person fighting in the Crucible would always lose because they're always fighting someone with powers, unless they get like the big underdog win, which that would have to be addressed, later. But
No, I
other
mean
than that, yeah,
that was the introduction in that one issue with one of the Guthrie kids, and we haven't seen the Crucible that much outside of that, at least in the books we read. But I don't think it's specifically just for people from House of M. I mean, obviously not in this issue because Karma has her powers. It's just like, I mean, I guess it's mostly for people from House of M, and she's doing it as a loophole because she wants to die for a certain reason. I guess it doesn't matter, but
I guess because the way I understood it was that it was for people that had lost powers and wanted to become a mutant again. But your point still stands. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. There's elements that are unexplained, but still, I guess at the same time, we're not really far into this as you think. We're only kind of a year and a half almost. But X-Men number 20, Jonathan Hickman, Francisco Mobili, Sonny Go on colors. This is the big issue like people have been waiting for. It was previously delayed by I think like 2 months, but pretty big narrative implications going forward from this ending. So if you remember all the way back in Hoxpox, we have Magneto and Charles presenting Mystique to go back to that Orcus space station to destroy it, preventing Nimrod from coming online. That was one of the big things in Hoxpox, or it was the first arc of X-Men. I can't remember it and keep things straight. It's been a while, but the promise though is that if Mystique succeeds, they're going to move her wife Destiny to the front of the resurrection queue. The caveat though is that Charles and Magneto know that this is highly unlikely to happen, so it's basically like an empty promise. So Mystique infiltrates the station, plants this black hole bomb she gets from Forge, but Nimrod is able to use one of his duplicate bodies to prevent the destruction. So only his main personality gets destroyed, and Nimrod's like, "Hey, I'm online," and kills Mystique and throws her through the portal back to Krakoa. So when they bring her back, Charles and Magneto totally being dicks about it are like, "Hey, we want you to tell us directly to your faces you failed, so we're not going to bring back Destiny." So this sets up the huge upcoming event that they're going to call Inferno, where flashing back to a prior conversation that Mystique had with Destiny, where it's like, there's one island, but it won't be peaceful for long because if they don't bring me back, you're going to burn it all down. So it's going to be the first, I guess, X-Men that goes rogue or mutant that goes rogue because Charles and Magneto don't want to bring back Destiny. And if I remember back to Hoxpox, it has something to do with her powers in Moira McTaggart, which is why they don't want her there. So I don't know. It's setting up this huge point where like everyone's an asshole. No one's really good. The X-Men are still kind of assholes entirely in this new Krakoan age in the Hoxpox powers, status quo. And, it sets up the point for the stage for the House of Cards to start to fall here. Good issue, good art. I like the narrative of it, but also from the, stepping on one end, looking at it from the issue itself. I like the kind of ideas that are brought up, but also it's like, as a fan of these characters, I don't like anyone just kind of being this cruel to other people for seemingly no reason, which I think Vince and I share that sentiment here a little bit. But it's like, it's this weird disconnect I have with these books right now where it's like, I like where things going. I like the plotting. and setting things up later, but also it's just like needlessly cruel for no reason other than like, finangled plot threads where I think Vince you'll present it where if you think hard enough, you can think around it very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, my takeaway here is screw Charles and Eric, and Mystique's plan doesn't make any sense. This is so conveniently written. It's a bomb, so she's going to Orcus to set off a bomb. And on Krakoa, you can resurrect anyone. You just need basically a backup. And Mystique has lived on Krakoa this whole time. She just talked to Professor X. She's a very easy resurrection. And she would be arguably a priority resurrection because she has very, unique, powerful powers. I think she's somewhat connected to the council. She has connections with a lot of these characters, et cetera, et cetera. So Mystique sneaks on board the Orcus base. She has a bomb in her hands. So why not just press the button and blow it up that instant as a suicide bombing without a dumb timer? Instead, she waits until Nimrod is actually turned on.
Yep.
Has herself revealed, surrounded by people with guns, throws the bomb on the ground, and it has a timer on it. So then she tries to run away. It's just kind of dumb. It doesn't make any sense. Just go in there, press the button, hide in a corner, and suicide bomb, and then get resurrected in 5 seconds. It's just really convenient.
The other thing about it, Vince, is that when she, quote, dies, she's thrown back to Krakoa in front of Charles and Eric, and they backed up her personality from that point. So when they brought her back, she already knew she failed, so they made her say it back to them again in just this weird asshole way of doing things.
Well, there's that.
Completely back to your point, she went to Forge to get this black hole bomb. So theoretically, it sucks the whole station into a black hole. Just detonate the damn thing. Exactly. I don't get it.
Or just have Forge make another bomb and just try it again. Try it 100 times until you succeed. I mean, I guess the point was to get Nimrod before Nimrod awakes, but she failed on that on page 5, not on page 20. It's just whatever. And then at the end they're teasing Inferno. I don't know if that's going to be another one of these 20-part crossovers, or if it's just going to be an arc within or a miniseries that Hickman does. But you don't need to reuse that. It's just, I don't like these things where it's this is Civil War 2, but even Civil War 2, at least it's Civil War 2. This is Inferno, but not that Inferno. This is Secret Wars, but not that Secret Wars, the other one. And it's lazy. It's going back to the well. It's nostalgia bait. And I mean, I don't care about this a ton, but it makes things really confusing for people who jump on Reddit and are like, hey, I just saw Avengers. Where do I read X-Men? And it's read this Inferno and then read this Inferno. And then there's already 2 Infernos because during Secret Wars, the Hickman Secret Wars, not the original Secret Wars, they did all these rehash alternate continuity miniseries in Battleworld. So they already have an Inferno after the original Inferno. There's probably another Inferno that I can't think of. It's really dumb.
Yeah.
Just think of a new name.
Yeah. I just have a problem where it's I like a lot of the ideas, but just 5 minutes of critical thought, it just completely falls apart. I just think with the teams and brain power involved here, it's just a glaring oversight. Unless there's something from House of X, Powers of X, or Powers of 10 that I don't remember off the top of my hands for why this is a big deal. I can't off the top. So if let me know, and I'll be oh, okay, I guess that's an oversight we had. But for us, we kind of tore this out in 3 minutes and figured out why none of this works.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna keep reading select series and single issues, for the alongside our show and everything like that. Yeah. But I've kind of not even just I've just been flip flopping on this whole era, just constantly every week. But I've also been this is kind of more of a beginning of the show segment, just not related to the actual books, but I've been going through a downsizing thing with my collection. And thinking over do I want this book? Do I want that book? Am I going to read this again? Am I going to read it 5 times again? And actually, like several weeks ago, I was like, all right, I'm kind of into collecting Hickman era X-Men. So I impulse bought the hardcovers for House of X and Ten of Swords. And then this week, I'm like,
Now you already sold them.
I'm like, well, actually, that was a stupid impulse purchase. So now I sold them like 2 weeks after I received them, never even took off the shrink wrap. We'll see if I impulse buy them again, whether that's 2 weeks from now or 10 years from now.
If you do, I'm going to give you so much shit for it.
I mean, I could see my, like 10 years from now when I have like a totally different living situation, shelves, and like everything like that. Like I could see myself, when they eventually do like even more comprehensive versions of this era, or like they do thick paperbacks, like maybe I'd go for it then. But I'm kind of just reaching a point where it's like you have to set caps on things, and this is kind of a good endpoint just because the status quo is just so drastically different, and I'm iffy on it.
Yeah. All right. We're running longer than I thought we would. When it's just the two of us, we can get on tangents. Dan's not here to reel us in. But let's talk about Beta Ray Bill.
Yes, the third issue, written and drawn by Daniel Warren Johnson, colored by his usual Mike Spicer. I don't know if we covered it, but I didn't read the last issue, but I caught up. So Beta Ray Bill, he's hanging now with Scourge and Pip the Troll. They're in I feel like it's Musselheim, but it's spelled weird. I don't know how to pronounce this word, but it's the home of Surtur. It's where like all the fire trolls are and stuff. And they're looking for the Twilight Sword. And Scuttlebutt, who is Bill's longtime ship, is now a sexy robot chick. Nice. It's kind of like Mike's been playing Mass Effect recently. Is that character called Eve? It's kind of like Eve.
It's Edie. EDI. She's the AI on the ship in 2, and then she gets placed into a body in 3. It's very much the same kind of deal.
So it's kind of awkward because, like, even when she was just a ship-like voice, she has a weird dynamic with Beta Ray Bill. But to break the ice, they play an intense game of ping pong, which is super random and unexpected in this like Thor spin-off comic book, but it's drawn really, really well. And she also keeps a creepy record room, which Bill has just like never opened that door. And it's just like VHS tapes or whatever format it's in, because there is some kind of hard format on shelving of just like everything Bill has ever done in his life with her. It's kind of weird. And then she like splits her body in half and is like, oh, I made you a dope axe as well, even though we're about to get you a different weapon. But she's also still the ship. And they're now in the form of a literal ship as they sail through the lobble of Musselheim. And Scourge breaks out the big guns for another battle, obviously, evoking his classic moment from Simonson's Thor 362, which was his death. And he's died like twice over, because I think he also died in War of the Realms, but he's Asgardian, so it doesn't really matter. And then at the very end, they get to the bottom of the ocean of lava and they pop out a hole. And they're like in darkness, and there's dark things obscured. To be continued. There's some really awesome art here. I always love some cyber chicks, as it were, with Scuttlebutt here. And I like the ship between Beta Ray Bill and his own robotic AI ship over Bill and Sif, which is, I guess, like a late era. I don't know. I don't know when that started. I don't know if that's a late era Jason Aaron thing that carried over into Donny Cates or what. But I like Thor with Sif, and Jane Foster just not with Thor. But that's a really fun issue.
Yeah, it's 3 issues in. I think you missed issue 2, but that was a lot of setup. That was where we were introduced to Pip the Troll in Scourge being on the ship. But it's this ragtag crew that you add. Scuttlebutt is now a personality that can go on the missions with them. Daniel Warren Johnson, man, just crushes it in the art. There's a heavy metal soundtrack blaring as you're reading this, and it's awesome. Like, one of the most fun books we have from Marvel right now. And I don't want it to end. But I'll go into our second to last book of the rundown. This is Batman Superman number 18. Gene Luen Yang, Ivan Reis, Danny Mickey on inks. Third part of this multi-generational cross-dimension story that, quite frankly, is a little hard to follow, but definitely fun. Which, if there's one thing I've described Gene Luen Yang books at this point, it's fun and inventive. The whole first issue of this was playing with how to tell a story off of film reels, where you read one story, then go back and read the other story. Like Superman was on top, Batman was on bottom, and then they converge at the end. It was really, really cool. But no more of that here. It's been kind of more straightforward comic booky after that. But these stories are kind of throwback to this kind of crazy Silver Age-esque kind of deal. So on Earth Zero, which I think is our main Earth now, Batman and Superman are facing the World Archive robot trying to stop him because he's messing with all these film reels. That's how he collects the remnants of these different dimensions and worlds. And like think burn mark, like full burn marks are referenced where they're splicing things together, so things are getting out of whack and hand. So we have two, like Batman and Superman are trying to stop them, but also inside the film reels, we're having the first team up of like the Golden Age-esque Batman and Superman because their reels got spliced together. So, and they're trying to stop Dr. Adam, who turns out to be a time displaced Lex Luthor, whose world was obliterated by the archive, and he's trying to contain everything and trying to jump into the real world, which is what happens here at the end. So there's a lot going on. It's a little confusing, quite honestly, but endlessly entertaining. So the ending sees here is like Lex gets through in Earth Zero's time and space. So I'm wondering, are we going to have two versions of Batman and Superman teaming up to fight Lex in the World Archive and then end? But I'm liking this. Like I'll tell Vince, like, this is not like the 1-for-1 Golden Age Batman, Golden Age Superman. They're reminiscent of their looks, but their worlds are very different. Like Superman on Batman, Golden Age Batman's world never existed. The ship landed in a crash and it killed baby Kal-El, so he never became Superman. And in Superman's world, only Thomas Wayne was killed, so Bruce is like traumatized and scared of anything. But also, I should say, there's Robin here too, so like kind of Golden Age Dick Grayson as well. Just really fun. I like the art here too, though I think some of Ivan Reis's layouts are getting a little bit too crazy for his own good, where the story kind of gets a little bit hard to follow. But this is going to conclude in the upcoming annual, which I'm kind of ready for it to be over, just because I think it's getting a little bit bloated. But I'll go to our retro book. I'll hand it to Vince. Avengers number 368 from November 1993.
Yes, written by Bob Harris, art by Steve Epting, inks by Tom Palmer, which is very important in this case. Tom Palmer, longtime Avengers artist, and kind of Avengers inker, and kind of like slightly changes what people's art looks like. So this is the first part of the Blood Ties crossover with X-Men. Bob Harris was both the lead editor of the entire X-Men line, but also writing Avengers, which is a kind of weird situation. There's some wild crap going down in Genosha, and Magneto is somewhere out there in villain mode following the events of Fatal Attractions, and ditto to Wolverine being off the map right now due to Fatal Attractions getting his adamantium ripped out. And so the actual story here, Val Cooper, who at this point is kind of in control of X Factor. This is the era of X Factor where, it's Jamie Madrox, Quicksilver, Polaris, that whole crew, strong guy. So Val Cooper, Henry Gyrich, and Nick Fury, they're meeting to discuss what's going on in Genosha. Basically, the UN is figuring out a plan, but they're the UN, so they're just like, everyone chill out while we figure something out. And the Avengers have to stay away. So Nick Fury stops in with the Avengers, also calls in the West Coasters to go all the way across the country to deliver this message. And then Gyrich and U.S. agent recruit Professor X to actually try and go to Genosha to figure things out. And they're bringing along Beast, who is an ex-Avenger, obviously. And also they're bringing the whole X-Men separately. So the X-Men are heading to Genosha. But as teased in the opening, we learn that Quicksilver and Crystal's daughter Luna has been kidnapped by Fabian Cortez. And when Crystal figures that out, really ticks off the Avengers. And so they're rolling in, going to Genosha, in spite of orders, which means that S.H.I.E.L.D. has to be there to stop them, to attempt to. And that's basically where the issue ends. It's a 90s Avengers issue. It's not like deep 90s. So we're not even at Operation Galactic Storm yet, I think. And this is obviously way before the crossing. Epstein has enough like of a 90s X-Men adjacent style. And obviously, as I said, Harris had the connections on like the writing/editing side. So the crossover meshes pretty well. But I mean, in the crossover as a whole and this issue in isolation, it's nothing super special. But what I rolled November 1993 from Marvel, I thought this was a interesting pick at least.
I mean, that's your opinion. I kind of dreaded every moment of this because I hate Bob Harras scripts because they're so horribly compact and overwritten. And when I mean compact, I mean not short. It's long, drawn out, overwritten. Like, it's funny you say he's an editor because he needs someone to chop out like half a script from him because it's just so drawn out. I hate Nick Fury's costume here. He's got the stupid like face, like the hair's out. Like, I don't know why he needs a mask. Like, he doesn't. He's got big shoulder pad armor too. Steve Epting basically, runner up in the Jim Lee lookalike contest right now in terms of art. Nothing from what you'd compare as art in Captain America in 2005. They're very different, but still very good in different ways. Then Fabian Cortez sucks. Like, I don't like Fabian Cortez. So it's like just a setup. It's just people talking. It's nothing special. I'm just like, I guess my question for you would be, didn't West Coast Avengers end in 89?
No, it's well, I think it's ending basically right around here. So apparently the same month as this is West Coast 100. I mean, West Coast issues, let's see. So West Coast 100 is this month, and then 101 the next month is part of this. It's part of Blood Ties. And then 102, issue 102 in January 94 cover date is the final issue of West Coast Avengers. Okay.
I thought for some reason that they ended it, that they were done in 1989 for some reason. Then I know they would go on to become kind of pseudo Force Works, but
yeah,
it's everyone's wearing a leather jacket.
I mean, I like the leather jackets, and I like this
cool leather jacket design, but it's just I rather them all be in costumes.
Yeah, and it definitely like kind of falls in line with some other artists of the period, but I like Steve Epting on 90s Avengers. But ultimately, it was just like, here's the thing, like I don't think we've ever checked in on this run. It's part one of a story, even though it references some recent stuff. And like, honestly, like I didn't have that many great options. I'm trying to quickly look through. I forget what the contenders were. One of them was a random issue of Moon Knight drawn by Stephen Platt, which would have been possibly more of a mess.
Would have been better for notoriety this week as Oscar Isaac officially confirms he's playing Mark Spector.
Oh, yeah.
But there's no way we could have planned for that. But, I mean, you like this era of Avengers. It just comes down to the clashing of, like, I think the more I look at it, like, mid-90s Marvel, it's just, you're going to get some good art, but man, that art's going to take a hit because there's so many, dialogue boxes, thought bubbles crammed all over the page where really a lot of stuff can be trimmed out. But that's Avengers number 368. We'll go to picks of the week. Vince, what do you have?
Oh, I need to start taking notes ahead of time on my pick when I finish reading. I'm going to give it to me. I'm really trying to think. I think I'm going to give it to Stargirl as well.
You're going to give it to Stargirl? I'm going to give mine to Ray Bill, but Stargirl probably is my runner-up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one or the other. I think I'll lean Stargirl just to split it.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the show this week. It's when it's me and Vince, it runs long, like almost 90 minutes, as we start getting talking in theoretical what-if scenarios. But other than that, stay safe. And we'll see you next week. More books. Bye.